Good morning and welcome to the very first Anarcho-Caffeinated, a morning show where we look at what's going on in the world and help each other parse through all the misinformation and disinformation, the malinformation, maybe creating some of our own, if we're lucky. Grab your coffee with me, won't be long. I don't like to waste anyone's time. I know it's past noon on the East Coast, but have some coffee. If you're real hardcore, grab your beer, your whiskey. Take a few minutes out of your morning or afternoon. Not to get outraged, but just to hang out, taking a balcony view of all the crazy out there. So, anyway, as I said, this is the first edition of Anarcho-Caffeinated. I'm calling it AnCaf for short. I'm just going to be sipping and thinking out loud as I walk through some of my process in understanding the news. I had this great interview with Adam Heyman a few months ago, and he talked about this concept that I really love. One of his favorite phrases he shared with me is that the map is not the territory, meaning the news aims to provide us a map to understand what's going on in the world, allegedly. And of course, it's flawed, but that doesn't mean it's entirely useless. If you can understand people's biases and motivations, you can still use what they say to get at least a little bit of insight. And that brings me to the first topic of the day. Of course, the one everyone is talking about, the Douglas Murray versus Dave Smith debate that happened on Joe Rogan. I didn't have my mic in front of me. Thanks, Mark. Welcome to the show. How does it sound now? Does it sound better? Hey, it's the first one, guys. Sorry about that. Anyway, the first topic of the day. Everyone's talking about the Douglas Murray versus Dave Smith debate that happened on Joe Rogan. It's almost 100% of my feed on X right now. And that was just released on Thursday, and I will admit I haven't even seen the last hour yet, just the first two, but it was painful. I will watch the rest, and it's possible that I'll adjust my take on it after that, but I kind of doubt it. I think I've seen enough. And just so you know, my biases, I tend to side with Dave, although not on everything, but I expected a lot more from Murray. I thought this was going to be a challenge at least, but from my perspective, Murray cared very little about the substance of Israel and Ukraine, the two topics they discussed. And instead, they spent about the roughly first 45 minutes talking about why Joe Rogan shouldn't have people like Dave Smith on to talk. And then he attacked two people who weren't even there and made Joe and Dave justify two completely other people's existence. It was pretty wild stuff. Just in case you haven't seen, I'll play a little bit of this so that you can see what I'm talking about.
I don't think he appoints himself an expert in anything.
Who's that other dude who thinks he's an expert on Churchill?
Oh, Daryl Cooper does not think he's an expert.
In fact, I think it's everybody else is always calling him an expert, and he's like, I'm just a history
Have you
nerd."
ever absorbed any of his material? Have you ever consumed any of his podcasts or anything like
I
that?
tried.
Yeah?
It's pretty hard to listen to somebody who says, I don't know what I'm talking about, but now I'm going to talk. Or I don't know about this. Or I'm not capable of debating this historian, but I'm going to just tell you what I think.
Yeah, but that's not
I think that's a
exactly
little
that's
bit
not
out of
exactly what
context.
Daryl was saying. I mean, Daryl's point of view, however you feel about this, what Daryl is saying is he doesn't really like doing debates. He likes to do long format stuff where he can really explain his position.
If you throw a lot of shit out there, there's some point at which I'm just raising questions is not a valid thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's enough of that, I think. Yeah, I think this is fairly representative of the whole exchange, at least definitely the first third of it. So it seemed obvious to me that he was just appealing to authority. And in fact, Dave called him out repeatedly during the thing. And look at the comments. It does appear that way to a lot of people as well. But there's this whole other half of people who thought exactly the opposite. And that's what I always find that fascinating, no matter what the subject. It's not like, it was close. I think Dave made some good points and had a slight edge, or Murray did this right, but maybe not that. It's extremes. It's either Dave wiped the floor with him, or Douglas destroyed Dave and the whole thing. And so it's crazy to see. And if you're like me, it makes you feel like you're a little bit crazy. Did we watch the same thing? And you see this phenomenon happen everywhere. I think the first time I ever noticed it was in sports. When I was young, I used to love watching basketball, and because of kind of that random element that's introduced with referees, I would often feel like my team got shortchanged on the calls. I know if you guys watch sports, you're probably familiar with that feeling, right? And some games were just so bad, I thought, that no one could possibly have seen anything else. But this was the era before social media, where internet forums were just getting popular, so I would go on those and see what people were saying, and it was just like this. In those games where I thought that my team got absolutely hosed by the refs, I saw the opposite extreme opinions being expressed, that the other team was in fact the ones that got the short end of the stick with the refs. Win or lose, it didn't matter. I started to notice that there were always these people on both sides, not very fine people. No, someone has to be wrong. But anyway, I think you get the point that that's what we're seeing here. It's kind of this appeal to authority. Douglas came in right away hot, just saying, I shouldn't even be here. I shouldn't be talking to Dave. He's the same as these other two people. So just fallacies all over the place. It really was disappointing. The subject of experts is also really interesting. There's something to be said for expertise in a particular subject, but here's the thing. There are always experts that disagree with each other. And even in scientific fields, that should be pretty straightforward. But you get people that will challenge the accepted view. And sometimes they're wrong, but sometimes that leads to big breakthroughs in our scientific knowledge, technology, capability. And sometimes the quote acceptable experts in this, it's kind of an aristocratic worldview that Murray demonstrated on that show. Sometimes these experts get it wildly wrong. COVID is a clear example of that. I don't need to explain that, right? Like, I've talked about it a lot on Drop the Mask, and many, many other people, including Dave, talk about it regularly. I think that one's clear, right? But just like the news, it doesn't mean that those experts are without use. You just have to combine a couple of things, like their biases, because everyone has them, and then what they're saying out loud. You have to piece that together to really understand. And there, Dave cites some of those so-called experts. You could call that cherry picking, fine, but he takes quotes from and statements from people that do align with their motives and actions. The things that people like Netanyahu have said where he thought it was private but leaked out. Those things are far more indicative of their real motives than anything they say in a public speech. So, experts should be listened to, I think. So I take Murray's point a little bit, but take those experts with a huge grain of salt. No one's unbiased, and smart people seem to have a greater ability to rationalize their own incorrect views. And also, Murray's complaint was like, Joe Rogan is having too many of these people on that disagree with the quote experts, but the mainstream view is not missing from the discourse. That was Murray's point, right? Rogan's guests all lean one way, but there's a reason for that. It's because those opinions are underrepresented, and those are interesting. And now Joe's audience is bigger than the news, sure, but he's still not the popular consensus. We're still bombarded with the regime propaganda all day, every day. So I fundamentally disagree with the entire premise and the complaint that Murray makes here. But let's see some of the takes people have. The first one I want to show is Cernovich. He says, I don't consider Dave Smith an expert on Gaza. Douglas Murray is an expert and a propagandist who uses sophistry to avoid troubling questions asked by people like Smith. Dave is trying to be honest. Douglas most certainly is not. He lied repeatedly about Martyr Maid. That's Daryl Cooper. So, yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with that. Although maybe Dave should call himself an expert. There's a big question to be asked here. What makes someone an expert? Someone like Dave, who has taken a great deal of time and attention to the issues, read multiple sources, tested as ideas against many other people in debates, and none of them have measured up. None of them have been able to counter what he says. They just attack his character. They attack his credentials, including Murray. And I think Dave maybe should call himself an expert. There's probably a lot more he can learn, sure. And I should add, I'm very open to the idea that Dave is wrong about the whole thing, but I haven't seen anyone be able to counter the substance of what he says. So this is another thing that people on Murray's side thought was good. There's a point in the interview where he asks Dave if he's ever even been to Israel. We can see a little bit of that.
Was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of
There's
times.
no deficit?
No, there are
No
plenty.
goods were kept out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No,
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been.
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you
You're
can.
right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
No,
okay.
I find that
Lots
very.
of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so I
if
don't
you're
know
going
what
to
the.
spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't?
But
Yeah, that's really enough. But you can see the position here. Douglas Murray brutally shuts down Dave Smith when he admits he's never been to Israel or Gaza. If you're going to spend a whole year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it. And Dave, in the clip, he calls it a non-argument, and I mostly agree. There's an argument to make that if you haven't seen it with your own eyes, or if you have seen it with your own eyes, you could gain some extra insight into the subject, of course. But I don't see people talking about this, that going to visit Israel at the invitation of the Israeli government, where they give you a tour and show you what they want you to see, that could be more detrimental than beneficial. If you did that and you went to Gaza and got their version of the tour, heard from them and their struggles, you'd probably come away with a very different opinion. So not only is it a non-argument, I think in this case, it's actually negative. He hurts himself by pressing this point so much. So that's really all I wanted to say about that. I don't think Murray looked good here, and I didn't come in hating him or anything. I still don't know enough about the Israel situation to say for sure what the right answer is, but no one that I've seen has been able to counter these arguments from Dave very well. It usually devolves into this false dichotomy. Like, if you don't support Israel unconditionally, you're an anti-Semite, and that's just stupid. I got one more quick thing for you, though. I came across some comments from Bernie Sanders, our favorite socialist, Bernie, in this CNN town hall. So let's go to it. The question you can see in the Chiron is about tariffs. Let me scroll up here. Has the tariff chaos permanently damaged the U.S. economy and reputation around the world? Yeah. So here's what he says. Let's watch.
So the idea that this nation, which all of us want to see as what did Ronald Reagan call the city on the mountain?
Shining city on a hill.
City on a hill, close. All right. I don't quote Reagan all that often. But, we want to be a model to the world. We want people to look at us and say, we want to be like the United States. Not, oh God, United States, what are they doing? So.
Yeah, so that's it. This is something that you think ought to be persuasive, right? Like appealing to the other side by quoting one of their heroes, Ronald Reagan in this case. And I'm sure I've been guilty of doing this too, but it doesn't actually work. I think because they know that he doesn't believe it. Like Bernie doesn't give a shit about Reagan. He probably despises him because that's what he's been trained to think. So people know that. They don't see this as persuasive whatsoever. The fact that he fumbles the quote also really just cements it. Like, he doesn't care. He's trying to appeal to the other side, but it doesn't really work. Anyway, I got one more clip from that. In this one, Bernie's talking about people losing jobs. So we'll see it, but he's equating people losing jobs in the federal government to the jobs that may be lost by advances in technology, which is kind of weird, but let's get into it.
I want everybody to think about this. Most people, we have millions of federal employees. Most people are not federal employees. And I think many people say, wow, that's outrageous. I really feel for these federal employees thrown out on the street. But I want you to think about this. If Musk can do this to federal employees, some of whom are in unions, some of whom work for years, what do you think he's going to be doing when artificial intelligence and robotics comes for your job?
I gotta pause it there. There's already so much wrong here, and it's hard to know where to start. But for one, the analogy doesn't hold at all. These are two completely different things. Firing federal workers and job loss due to technology improvements are not the same thing. We're getting rid of federal workers who have jobs that are already useless. If we improve technology, then yeah, we may get rid of some jobs that become useless. But anyway, I just don't buy that breakthrough technology hurts workers in the aggregate. I don't think that's real. It does hurt some individuals who lose jobs, and that shouldn't be glossed over. We feel for those people, but it does make things better for everyone in the end. It makes things cheaper. It makes it so you shouldn't have to work so much. That is, if our government weren't stealing from us to prop up a global empire. But this is a different world from the 1900s. People shouldn't expect to be in the same job for their whole lives anymore. That's just not the world we live in. And the idea that we need to just be trying to protect American workers, that's really anti-progress. You're purposely trying to retard the economy and growth to save jobs that hypothetically wouldn't need to exist anymore. So, look, he's not totally wrong about all of it. Some people are going to be displaced by new technology. It may soon be so rapid that it causes a lot of pain, and we'll have to figure out how to deal with it. And to say that they don't give a damn about you is really rich, coming from a lifelong politician. I don't think I got to that point yet. Let me play the rest of
Guess
this.
what? The job you have today ain't going to be here in 10 or 15 years. And you think Musk and his friends are saying, oh, my goodness, how do we protect American workers from the explosion in technology that we're seeing? They don't give a damn about you. If this is what they could do to federal employees, think about what they could do to people in the private sector.
It's just so silly. Just to think that Musk is out there trying to improve technology so that he can put people out of work is ridiculous. He's trying to put federal workers out of work with Doge, allegedly. Again, I haven't seen any real cuts, but it's because they are not doing anything productive. He's trying to increase productivity with all of it. And if those people aren't doing unproductive work in the government, they might go find productive jobs in the private sector. So, yeah, like I said, some people are going to be displaced by new technology. Maybe it's going to get so quick that it's going to be painful. We'll have to figure out how to deal with it. But the government doesn't give a damn about you. So hearing this coming from him is really kind of crazy. I mean, at least these companies have to sell you something that you want, leaving aside that they also meddle in the government and get things done by force that way, which is wrong. But aside from that, they have to make a product that people want, or they couldn't stay in business. So yeah, the job you have today probably won't be here in 10, 15 years. So start thinking about it. Things are going to change, and that's going to be scary for some people. I get it. But this is always the argument against technology. It's like people are Luddites, and then they use protectionism as a shield. But there's nothing magical about a factory job. If humans don't have to do those jobs, it's much better for everyone. Trump and Bernie are kind of on the same side of this, and they're really both wrong. We don't need to protect jobs that aren't useful, that doesn't help in the long run. It's going to make the economy crash eventually. Anyway, that's really all I got for today. Let me know what you think. I'm going to try to do this weekly to start, then maybe pick it up as I get better. And if this sucked, well, let me pull a Sam Harris on you and say, just imagine if it had been 10 or 100 or 1,000 times better. Then think about how great it was and give me a review. Anyway, like I said, this is my first one. I'll get better at it. Thanks everybody for joining. It's my first live solo show, really. Thanks for being here. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll stick around for a minute, but yeah, really appreciate the support. Come watch me and Mark Pulse on If by Whiskey Monday nights. We're going to skip this Monday, but we'll be back the following week. And yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys. I will see you later.